All right, hey everybody, welcome back. This is the Mental Workshop, and this is where I get to invite you guys to come and think with me. So that's what we're gonna do. All right, guys, on this one, here's the question. Why do assumptions feel like facts? That's an interesting question, and this is definitely one that I haven't thought about, unlike the last one that we had. But this one, let's explore it. That's the beauty of this. We're gonna dive in. So, why do assumptions feel like facts? One way to think about this is, well, let's first define it, right? What would we consider an assumption? Okay, and I don't have the dictionary here, but when we assume something, we usually are doing it from experiences that we've had. Or facts or beliefs or values, or just missing information. Our brains are really good at filling in gaps, okay? If there's a question mark on something, we'll usually take from experiences that we've had, other situations that we've had, circumstances, situations, dilemmas, whatever. Anything that we've kind of already experienced in life, and kind of we fill in those gaps. So when we do that and we have enough of what we think can piece together almost like a crime scene or something like that, right? We've got all these things, you know, this guy had a candlestick, okay? There was fingerprints over here that kind of seems like it was that person at that time. We start to paint a fuller picture and it feels real at that point. We're like, oh, wow, we've landed on something. So when you start to assume things and it starts to fill in the gaps like that, it feels like facts. It feels like the reality. It feels like something we can easily say yes in our minds. But that's, I think, kind of one of the things that we I guess we get stuck on sometimes. So, okay, so that's kind of one example of maybe where that might happen. But again, let's go back. What this question that got me led down there that I didn't even answer. Assumptions. What is really an assumption? It's when you're, boy, I wish I actually had the definition here, because now I'm going to struggle, and that's what we're doing here, wrestling anyways, and that makes us a little bit more honest, right? Which is a good thing. Okay, so defining an assumption is actually more challenging than I thought. I know what it is, but defining it, I could think of how to use the word 100 different ways when you assume something. But how do you define that? That's really challenging to define. I'm probably going to look at the dictionary after this. I guess I could describe it. It's not the same as a definition. I feel like a definition is like what you believe that word means. Well, it's about as close as truth, right? You can open up 20 different dictionaries and they all might have a slightly different definition, right? But they probably all have a little bit of truth in them. Yeah, this is not even the important question to define assumption, I don't think. And here we are, we're struggling. Yeah, I want to be careful. That's why I won't just throw out any answer, because I think the proper definition of it, I mean, I can give examples, right, of ways that you can assume, I mean, I've got so many catchphrases for, you know, assuming makes an ass out of you and me, and, you know, I've heard that before, and, you know, I got different ways of describing it, but not a definition. All right, well, I'm going to trust that you guys know. You guys could probably pull up the definition. I don't want to put words in our mouth or push us down a different direction. I think that that's probably the better call here. So let's move on from it. I'm going to assume that we all know what the definition is, or at least have a good understanding of an assumption. Let's talk about a fact, okay? I can definitely probably define a fact better. Okay, a fact is, what I would like to say is reality. It is what it is, okay? You can't change it. A fact is something that's real, whether or not you've had different experiences in the world and maybe you want to see things a little bit differently. But a fact is just a hard thing. It's objective reality. It's the real deal. It is what it is. Okay, and you wouldn't make an assumption about a fact. I guess you could, but it doesn't define it as a fact when you do that. So let's get back to the question here. Why do assumptions feel like facts? I think with the first exploration, I think that did a really good job of kind of answering that. I'm not even sure if I think I would have heard that or wrestled with that before, because I already kind of had that thought formed. And so that kind of was one of the first things I kind of reached for in my mind to kind of define that. But normally, if it's a question I haven't really wrestled with before, I'll usually ask questions. Okay, so I think that these mental workshops are going to be kind of, are going to be a mix. Okay, it's going to be me thinking, and it's also going to be me trying to really wrestle with these things, with ideas that I've never had before. So we're going to be able to find some of those questions as we go, but I'm starting to see that, some of these I've already kind of heard or wrestled with before, or I've written articles on it, or I've considered it. That's kind of the nature of the work that I'm doing here. So it's hard for me to really have a question that I haven't thought about in some way before. And that's kind of going against this whole thinking lab a little bit, or at least I guess the way that I initially thought about it, how I wanted these to kind of be. But that's okay. We're still thinking, and that's the bigger picture. Okay. So that was a pretty cleaned up answer in the beginning. Let's think about it. Maybe can we think about it from a different direction? One that maybe you've thought about before, or that maybe you've thought about. Boy, I can't tell you though how many times I've assumed things and thought that they were real, but I'm good at chasing down to know. I like to know. And I found the reality of what happens when we assume things, when we pull different thoughts. In fact, I can give you guys an experience that I had that challenged me. I had my mother had told me, and she sometimes liked to gossip. I think everybody does, honestly. If we're we like to talk about other people. I would hope that we all keep it good, but sometimes gossip goes in the opposite direction. It's negative. But in this certain case, my mother with one of her sisters told me that she had said something kind of negative or sleight of hand about me. And my mother wouldn't tell me what it was over. And I'm like, well, why would you bring that up? Now you got me wondering. Now you won't tell me. So I had already started to put in my head what I thought that was. I remembered I had made a remark to my mother about her sister's husband had dropped off something at the front steps, and I was in a mood or whatever, and I said something on the lines of, well, why did he just leave it on the front steps? Why couldn't he just walk it in 2 more feet and bring it inside the door? Something like that. And when she was talking to her, this was just a few days after that. And in my mind, since my mother didn't tell me what the topic was, my mind was reaching for ideas. What could it have been? Why would she have talked about this? She made me have to do some thinking on this and trying to put those pieces together. That's why I had already thought about this and realized this one ahead of time. But it seemed to fit, right? I thought, it would make sense that maybe my mother might have said something because she likes to gossip. And maybe since I said that to my mother, like, hey, why didn't he just bring it inside in kind of a huffy way? I thought maybe my mom might have said that just in a conversation, just like, why didn't this guy bring it in? You know what I mean? Why did they leave it on the steps or something like that? And then maybe the other person got mad about that, for whatever reason. And that's what my mind landed on and believed. I thought that I had done a good job of thinking about that and investigating it. And I'm like, well, that makes sense, right? It makes sense. It kind of fits the bill. So instead of me just accepting that, which I kind of did, I made some assumptions. I thought that was definitely probably the truth. I decided anyways to text my aunt. And I said, hey, hey, I heard, something happened the other day. My mother won't tell me what it was. I hope everything's all right. I hope you're not mad at me, or something like that. And I did it in a very approachable way so that she can kind of understand where I'm at and that I don't know what's going on. And then she said it was something about paper towels, something about, towels that were up there. And I guess she just said something in the same kind of way that I did when I was dealing with taking something inside. She kind of said, well, why doesn't your son do this? Do you know what I mean? Just something simple. You know what I mean? That doesn't even bother me either. You know what I mean? We all blow off steam and we just say things in a moment. But that showed me that my assumption was wrong. And I believed my assumption. I thought it was that. I almost didn't even need to text her at all. But that showed me a different reality. And that opened my eyes that, how many other places am I making assumptions or creating these stories or something like that? So I think that probably answers this question probably pretty well, at least the way that I see it. So I can't really wrestle with this one because I've already wrestled with it, or I've already seen the reality on it. So we're going to try to get some good questions, though, that really make me wrestle. But I like thinking about it, and I don't mind even bringing up these experiences when I have them. I think that they're helpful anyways, and they're good ways to kind of think about it. I'm sure you guys can probably sit there and recall some situations where maybe this kind of stuff happened to you. I swear it's part of being human. We all probably run into these things, and we don't always chase down the answers. And then we're kind of stuck with the answer we give it. And then sometimes that gives us a negative idea of what that other person thinks about or our beliefs towards them or anything like that. So you can see where this kind of turns into a problem. I recommend for anybody out there, be brave and bold enough to kind of bring it up, even when it's hard. I mean, it was hard for me to send that text message to my aunt. Even though I know that maybe you guys see the text and the way that I said it, it makes sense. It was hard for me to find those words to ask her in a very way that didn't make it seem like I was attacking her in some way or that I was angry about it. And I knew I didn't want to come off that way, and I didn't want to be emotional about it. But it's hard sometimes. The way that I seen it, I was like, well, now probably her husband's probably mad at me and she's mad at me too. And, part of me is like, man, I want to heal this. I want to move on from this. I don't want to be thinking about it. I don't want to ruin the relationship I have with my aunt and my uncle. So it kind of like turned into this situation, and it was hard. But what I recommend is you just try to at least bring it up in a way that you're not defensive. You're not trying to attack another person, or it's not from emotions. So take some time to kind of formulate that. That can be challenging. I know that it's challenging for me, even when I know better. So maybe that's just a good lesson to pull out of this one, is it's always worth chasing down the truth. I would say that there's maybe a few situations where maybe the truth can't happen or shouldn't happen. I can think of maybe a bad toxic relationship where maybe somebody's reading this the wrong way, and they're trying to chase down answers and they were blaming somebody else. I could think of those times where there's way too much emotion on it. There's way too much toxic and negative energy around that. And I think even if you tried to do something positive or try to come at that non-emotional, I think it would end up getting emotional at some point, and that would also influence and impact ultimately getting to any clean truth or anything like that. I've been there. When you get really emotional and there's love on the line and that kind of stuff, and especially when it's kind of twisted and it's already kind of the ship has sailed, it can get real ugly and that kind of stuff. So I can think of some times where maybe this isn't the answer, but I can think overwhelmingly when it comes to healing typical relationships that you have between people, this is usually one that works really well, is just getting to the bottom of it and expressing your side in a very, what's the word? I don't want to say gentle, maybe approaching it from a very nice angle. It just makes things easier. And it's just better that way, in my opinion. I've always found that to be helpful and keep relationships alive, because even if, I don't even need to go back, we're going to be wrapping this one up, but even if the thing that I assumed was true, I opened up the door to help her understand that, hey, I had heard about this. I'm sorry that you feel that way. That kind of thing. You see how I kind of said that by saying that in the words that I used? And it would give her a chance to explain herself and let us both move on from it and heal from it. And hopefully her kind of maybe learn something from it. Like, hey, maybe whatever, be careful because, my mother tends to like to bring some of that stuff back to me, or vice versa. Sometimes I do it too. I'm human too. It happens, and I try to catch myself doing it. I try to do better, but we all get emotional. We all get angry sometimes, and we all sometimes say some things we don't mean to say. And sometimes we do it in front of somebody, and that somebody brings it back to us, and it just happens. Part of being human. Welcome to being human. All right, guys, that's all I got for you guys on this one. I'll catch you guys on the next one. See you guys there.